The TrekWorks YouTube channel is sponsored by K'tinga Controls. And by HDA Model Works, suppliers of scale model lighting products, detail parts, and complete model kits. Visit HDAModelWorks.com today. Hello and welcome back, everyone. Boyd here with you, and this is part 6 and the finale of our 1/350 scale Polar Lights Klingon K'tinga build. As you guys can see here in the shot, I've been hard at work on the model and she's all finished up. I've got it mounted on my base. I did a little work on the base there to kind of spiff that up a little bit, and we'll show you the model in closer detail in just a second here. We'll pick up the camera and fly around it a little bit, and I'll talk about the detail we put into it and some of the special features. But before we get to that point, I want to catch you guys up on what I did to get to this point after we left off with you in video part 5. We left off there where we were installing the rear photon launcher and getting that wiring all set up and everything. And then after that point, it was time to tidy up all the rest of my wiring, so I took some of my small little zip ties and got all the wiring, tied together and fastened down inside the model and all cleaned up and looking really nice. And then the step that I like to take after that on all these builds that I do when we're going to use lighting is I do what we call a burn-in test, and that is letting the model run with the lights on overnight, or for about 24 hours. And that'll basically tell you if you're going to have an LED or a LED tape or something like that is going to fail. It'll fail in that amount of time if it's a bad one or something like that. And so I did that and came back the next day and checked everything, and everything checked out just fine. It's kind of an important step that you do that before you go ahead and seal everything up. You want to find that out beforehand. Sealing up the model and then finding a problem is a nightmare that we've all had to deal with at one point or another. But for the most part, that's worked for me 99% of the time, and I haven't had any issues. But so we got past that, and it was deciding then that we needed to go ahead and start thinking about sealing the whole thing up, and that was putting this big piece here back down onto the top and closing that all up. So that's a really big step. Well, looking around on the internet at other people who have built this model on YouTube videos and some of the build threads and pictures I've seen, the light leaks that appear on this model on the back half of the ship, we already kind of talked about the ones on the front in one of the earlier videos. I've already gone ahead and addressed all those. They all kind of seem to be in the same area, and it seems to be mostly around this impulse deck area here and the shuttle bay area. Everybody was getting leaks around here and next to the sides of this grill, and then around the edges here around this detail there. So I decided I wanted to try to address that before I went ahead and sealed the model up. And what I did is I went ahead and assembled this whole thing, finished up installing the shuttle bay and all that, and then I glued that whole assembly down onto the top of the wings here. So I would put this all down as one piece. That way all my wiring was also tied together, and all my lighting from this part was tied in, so I only had 2 wires coming off of that, which then came down and connected to all the rest of the wiring that's in this model that we already showed you that we had done. So that made that really easy. But so what I did is I have a little small portable fluorescent light. It's probably about this long or so, and I shined that up on the bottom side of the this area right here to try to look for light leaks, and sure enough, they popped up in those exact same spots, right around in here, a few other little spots. And I was also worried because we also added all this extra lighting up in here for the lights for the shuttle bay, which the model was never designed to have done, and so I knew that we could have a chance for even more leaks. So, but long story short, I was able to see all the leaks in there, and I went ahead and fixed them all from the inside, which is a lot easier to do than trying to fix them from the outside. You know, I would shine my light around and move it around and try to find all those spots, and I took a little bit of tulip, which is a fabric, you know, dye or whatever. A lot of you guys use it out there. It's kind of a thick paint is what it is, in black, and I just squeezed a little bit in there. I used my little applicator tool, which I'll show you. Again, the same one that I use for doing my windows and things like that. I sucked a little bit of that up into this, and I just sat there and injected it in the little gaps, you know, on the back side, and just kept checking and looking until I was satisfied that I got, you know, 90% or as many as I could see of the light leaks gone. And so we were all set then to go ahead and put the top down after that. So starting to think about that, as I mentioned in one of the earlier videos, when I first test fit the lid down on here, it didn't want to fit very good because the receiving pins on the lower half, the female side, the holes just aren't big enough. They're way too small, as a matter of fact. I mean, they're not off just a little bit, they're off a lot. So I was able to take my hobby knife and just spin it around in each hole and open that up, and that immediately made the whole top want to fit down on there a whole lot better. So we did that, and then it was time to start working it down. So what I wound up doing, knowing that this is a really big piece and we're going to have to go over these curves, and in test fitting I knew that the biggest gaps I was going to have was right in here and right down in here on the corners down here, because they're kind of sharp turns. I decided to work in sections at a time. So I started off by putting a big bead of glue all the way around the whole thing on the top and the bottom, and then I started off putting it together right here. And I started off using a couple of the, you know, plastic modeler's clamps that we all use to hold things together, and in the trouble spots. The rest of it I was able to just use regular masking tape like I always do, and just pull it down on there and, you know, pull it really tight and pull it around the bottom and secure it. And that method has always worked really good for me. So I got the clamps put in place, and we just started working our way all the way around here until I got all the way around the entire thing, and then I got it all locked down. And then I just let it dry again for a good, you know, 24 hours. I could tell there was a lot of pressure on it, especially in these areas right here in the back and down in here. So I made sure to let it dry a really long time and let that glue get nice and hard before I tried to, you know, release the clamps or anything like that. And so we did that the next day and pulled all the clamps and everything held together just fine. There were a couple of small little gaps in it here and there, back by the shuttle bay and things like that. And again, I just went in there with a little bit of my tulip and filled in those little seams. They were really tiny. I mean, they were minor. In fact, they didn't even show up. Light leaks didn't even show up in room lighting or whatever. They only showed up when you turn the lights completely out and you were totally in the dark, which most of the time, you know, I'll never look at the model like that. I'm always, if it's in my display room and there's a light, you know, kind of a dim light in there, and then all the other models that are lighting up in there, don't ever let it get completely dark. But we wanted to take care of them anyway, so I went ahead and got those all cleaned up, and then I touched up a little bit of paint, and so then we had that big thing taken care of. So then it was time to, you know, just go ahead and start doing my final detail on my weathering and everything, and because we had everything kind of looking, you know, I showed you on one of the earlier videos too, I had done some pre-weathering on the bottom part of the wings there, and so I decided it was time to start, you know, tidying it all up and getting all the weathering all tied together. And so I did. I went ahead and did the same method I used for the bottom that I showed you, where I took my Tamiya inks and I put it in my airbrush, and I just started off with lightly misting a little bit of the medium brown color over the whole thing. I mean, I didn't, you know, I didn't put it on really heavy. I just kind of went in streaks, you know, and until I could start to see those really bold colors that we put on there, especially that really light green, kind of cucumber green. It looks like the center of a cucumber. It's almost like a mint green. Started to see that dull down just a little bit, you know, come down a little bit. And then I came in with a little bit of the darker brown and just made a couple little streaks here and there on that to kind of highlight. And then I capped it all off by using some light gray, almost white on top of that. Now I used the Tamiya gray ink when I was showing you doing the bottom wings, and I was kind of commenting back then that it really wasn't showing up too much. So what I wound up doing, instead of using that this time, is I went ahead and mixed some really super light gray, almost white paint, and I just made it super thin, like it was almost like water. And then I used that to start dusting over it here and there and making little streaks. Now the reason I decided to do that is that the studio model has a sort of a white powder that's all over that thing, and it gives it that look, you know. And it's up for debate whether that's actually supposed to be on there, that they intended it to be on there for the filming, or there's an article that came out years ago talking about how they put that powder all over that model to get the Tesla coil electromagnetic effects during that special effects scene where the ship gets eaten up by Voyager or by V'ger. That was helping the arcs of, you know, electricity touch the model, or, you know, float around the model or whatever. That was some kind of conductive powder that they put on there, and that's the residue of it left over. They never bothered to clean it up after they were done, and that's what you're seeing in the photos of the studio model before they turned it into Kronos 1. So it's kind of up for debate on that, but anyway, it also, I decided to go ahead and do a little bit of that. I didn't do it as heavy as it is on the studio model, but it does sort of make the green disappear, and I think that's another reason that a lot of people get confused and say that they thought the model was gray in the film. Now when I pick the camera up here in a few minutes and we start floating around the model, I'll show you a couple of different angles with that and you'll see what I mean. But so I just kind of started going really light with that. I definitely didn't want to go too heavy with that. I took it really easy on that, and I just kind of went over all the little highlights on it with that, and I started liking what I saw. So that's what we wound up with, and I think it's a pretty good balance of being not quite as severe as it is on the studio model, but it, you know, it shows up on this one, and it definitely tones down those colors and makes it look a lot more realistic and not so toy-like and stark looking like it does when you first paint it. But it'd be perfectly fine if you want to leave your model, if you want to do all that intricate painting on this and leave it that way. That's totally up to you. Like I said in the last video, guys, when you paint these things, it's kind of nice to try to make it look like it did on the screen, but in the end, you're the one who has to be happy with how your model looks. So don't let the crowd dictate how you should do your model or anything like that. Don't try to please anybody else except yourself, and you'll be happy with your model at the end. So it's all about having fun and putting your own touches on things anyway. So I can guarantee you every one of these models that's built is going to look a little bit different, because everybody's going to have their own thoughts and ideas, and that's what's really fun about the hobby. You can, you know, pick things that you like and pick things you don't like that you see in other builds, and then you can put it all together in your own. So that's why we all do these videos and share our thoughts about this stuff. So, but I don't want to get up on some kind of podium about that. It's just, you know, it's all about the fun. So that's what I wound up doing, and I'm pretty happy with how my version turned out. I'm happy with how it looks. I think I got a pretty good balance of you know, the weathering, and I've got a look to that I think looks pretty close to, you know, the overall character of the original filming miniature. So I'm really happy with it. Now, after I finished doing all that weathering there, it was time to finish things up by, once I knew I wasn't going to be doing a lot of handling on the model anymore and anything big, it was time to go ahead and put down all these little greely parts that go on the front, which are really cool, by the way. There's a bunch of stuff that goes on there. Don't ask me what it is. It's a bunch of little pipes and flags and brackets and things like that, but they just add a lot of neat detail to the model. And that stuff was all weathered up pretty good too. So the colors that you're supposed to use are yellow, green, tan, and red for these areas here. And if you put them on there in those basic colors, they look, again, just like the rest of the model, too busy. They look too stark, and they look too, you know, they stick out too much. You shouldn't really notice them that much. When you look at the model in close inspection, you should see it, but they shouldn't be the first thing that you see when you look at the model. So the very first thing I did is I went and picked colors for all those things that were in the ballpark, but they were quite a bit more subdued. Like, instead of using a standard yellow, I used what they call a straw yellow, which is a really pale yellow to begin with. It's more of a darker, almost, I don't know, almost kind of a light tan or light brown yellow. And then for the red, I used some crimson red, which is a darker shade of red. And the green here, I just used the standard hull color that I started with, my base color. And then I just took my Tamiya dark brown ink and just went over everything after I, you know, painted it and put it on. and that brought it all down. And you'll see that up close here in just a second, like I said. But I'm pretty happy with how all that blended in too, because looking at the model, I can see it, and hopefully from this, a little bit far away, like you're seeing the model right now, you're noticing it, but it's not like totally jumping out at you, And but you will see it when I get a little closer with the camera. So that was pretty much the story on that. A little bit more weathering on the nacelles and things like that. Of course, we got the shuttle bay put in here at the back. One thing I'm going to mention too is I did notice something about the K'tinga Controls lighting system that I'm going to mention, and I'll talk to Ralph about that and see what he thinks. But I noticed that my engines in the back here were looking a little bit dim. They weren't lighting as bright as I thought they should be. And of course, I was running those off of the K'tinga Controls board. And there's no effects or anything going on there with the board. There's no flickering or fading or anything. They were just lit static. And I thought, let me test something here. So I disconnected one side and I hooked it directly up to power, instead of... Now, Ralph's board is set up where you don't have to have a resistor there, but to hook it up directly to the power coming in the model, I knew I needed a resistor. So I put a regular 470 ohm resistor on there, 1/4 watt, like the one I always use, and just hooked it up directly to power. And sure enough, it was probably about half again as bright as the one on the other side. So I decided to go ahead and do that to both sides and just get a little bit more light out of that, and I'm happy that I did, because it looks a lot better. So maybe Ralph will see that, or if I talk to him about it, he may make an adjustment on that going forward or something. But just kind of keep that in mind. Again, and you don't have to use the outputs from his board either. We wound up not using a lot of them because I did my own lighting. The only output I used basically was for the ramping up of the nav lights here, and the front and rear photon launcher, and the sound. So everything else that was meant to be hooked up, I just wired myself. So that was one thing that I dealt with. I got that taken care of. And so then we went back, and like I said, I had a couple little light leaks around the bottom here by the shuttle bay, and I cleaned all those up and everything. And then we just kind of did a little bit of weathering more on the back here with that same kind of ink and all that, around the nacelles a little bit more. And that pretty much wrapped everything up as far as getting it ready to go. So I was really happy with all that. And like I said, weathering is a subject where you can easily go too far, or you sometimes don't go enough or whatever. But what I like to do on the weathering is do a little bit, walk away for a little while, think about it, and come back and look at it. And if you look at it and it still doesn't look good, then do a little bit more. But don't try to do it all in one session. And the weathering always goes down in layers too. You can never make all your weathering look good in one, the first attempt. You're going to put down one layer of color, then you're going to go over the top of that with another, and then another, until you get it where you want it. And different methods too. Like I said, partly I sprayed it, partly I did it by hand, partly I did it with a little bit of Q-tips, scrubbing it a little bit to make it look like it was worn a little bit, and that all worked out. So, and then finally, to wrap everything up, I got my base all spiffed up here, if you guys can see this. I took the regular base that it comes with, and I had this part here that I showed you guys earlier that comes with the old AMT Klingon Vorchik kit, and I had painted that earlier before. And what I decided to do is I went and bought these color shifting paints from Hobby Lobby in blue, green, and red. So they don't really show up that great on camera, but in person they look really fantastic, because this blue will shift between sort of a bluish to a purple. This will shift to a green to a kind of a goldish green, and then the red turns from almost like kind of an orange to a red when you move around on it. And it's metallic looking, and it looks like a kind of a candy color or whatever, and it looks really pretty. I really like that. And then I backlit underneath of this. I've got a circle of green LED tape running around that just leaks out. I put little pegs underneath of this thing so it would just barely sit off of the top of it a little bit, and the light can leak out. And then I put a bead of clear silicone on the outside edge of those lights to kind of diffuse them a little bit. And I just decided to add that and give it a little something extra. We've got the little logo here that came with the photo etch set. Somebody out there that reads Klingon will have to tell me what it says. I think it might say the name of the ship or something, but I spiffed that up a little bit again using some of the Tamiya clear transparent paints, the red, the green, and then I went around the outside edge with the blue just to do the same kind of Klingon colors. And you'll see that a little bit closer here when we pick the camera up and get on it. But so I think that worked out pretty good. Now I was going to use the K'tinga Controls remote control system and put that in this model, but it was going to take a while to get it and everything. So I decided just to go ahead and build it out with the switch and all that. because I'm going to put this on a little bit better base later on. I'm going to, at some point, I may talk to Jerry at HDA Model Works, and we'll come up with something for this, like the V'ger cloud that I did on the small 1537 build that I did a couple years ago, with the lit up torpedo coming out of it and all that, which looked kind of cool. We might be able to do something a little bit better than that on a, because this is going to be a little bit bigger. But we'll see. But I'm really happy with the base just as it is. If I don't ever do anything with it, I'm perfectly happy. So so that's pretty much everything on the build side, guys. Again, if you have any questions at all, or if I missed anything that you guys were curious about as far as in between step 5 and where we are now, just drop a comment on the video and I'll try and answer it for you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause real quick, take the camera off the tripod so it's not bumpy for you, and we'll come back and we'll fly around the model a little bit and show you a little the detail in a little bit closer view, and I'll do the torpedo effects and all that, and we'll look inside the shuttle bay. So I'll be right back. Alright, here we are back with you again, and time to take a look at the model a little bit closer. We'll start off at the front here, and you can see that I've got the weathering done up on the top part that I talked about here. Just a couple little streaking action going back on the top of the bridge area here. Nothing really over dramatic or anything like that, just a little bit that you can notice it's there. I did a kind of the same thing along the sides here, and then I continued all the way back onto the neck here and onto this forward bulkhead. A little bit of streaks at the very top edge and the very bottom edge of it there, leading onto the wings on the top and the bottom. And here you can see the weathering a little bit closer up on the top of the wings. Again, I didn't go too crazy, I just did a little bit, dirtied it up a little bit. And like I talked about, I used a couple different methods there. I used the airbrush, I hand painted, and then I actually took a Q-tip and kind of scuffed and rubbed on it a little bit here to make it look worn in and that kind of stuff, and it worked out pretty well. Didn't do everything, completely symmetrical on both sides as far as the weathering, so it didn't look, it looks more natural. And there you can see back onto the wing. We'll go back up to the front here really quick, and I'll show you, I've showed you the torpedo effect before, but now we've got the sound effect going on with it. I got all that hooked up, and the speaker is mounted in my base down here, just underneath of this raised Klingon emblem. So it's hidden. You don't see the holes for the speaker, and that worked out pretty nice. So let's go with that. Push it once, and we've got 3 shots here. So as you can see, the sound comes through there really nice on that. Ralph's got the actual sound effect from the movie going on there. So let's look at the forward bulkhead here a little bit closer, and you can see what I was talking about with the little detail parts that are all over that. I weathered those down quite a bit, with a little bit of grime and dirt and everything. I just don't think the Klingons really like washing their ships too much. They're too busy being Klingons to wash their ships. It makes them look a little bit more intimidating that way anyway, and they're different than the Federation and exact opposites. The Federation, everything is pristine and all that, so it's pretty cool. I've always liked the look of the Klingon ships. And here's a little bit closer view of the impulse engine with our lighting going on in there. Some LED strip that I talked about, and using the painting method on the back side of that lens with a little bit of gray to tone that down a little bit. And we'll flip you around here to the side now and take a look at the nacelle and how I painted those. You can see I've got that color shifting blue there on the caps there at the end, which I'm really pleased with that. That turned out to be pretty darn close to what you can see in the studio model pictures. I don't know if it was a color shifting paint on that, but that's kind of neat that they have that available now, and it looks pretty cool. Just some basic weathering there. Mainly they just did some kind of overspray work there. They kind of blended some colors together there in the middle. A little bit of from what I could see in the original pictures, you could see that they kind of just grimed it up a little bit of this corrosion looking stuff here at the back, and I just used some raw sienna craft paint for that. Partly with a hand brush and partly with airbrushing that on. And you can see our little nacelle lighting there, which the little plastic part that comes in the kit, the little tube thing, you know. If you use just a regular LED in that area right there, it doesn't light up that bright. These two don't. The tail end actually does, but these don't. So my LED strip on there mounted like this, you know, facing it, makes those light up pretty good. Again, those are not supposed to be super bright. Those are just little marker lights. They weren't supposed to be floodlights or anything like that. There you can see them on the inboard side, on the other side. They're just lit up enough where you can notice them, and that's how they're supposed to look. Then you go around to the back here, and you can see we've got the tail lights, same way. That little plastic tube inside there bringing the light all the way to the rear, which works pretty good. Here you can see I did a little bit of grunge work on the tail caps there. A little bit of the same thing I did on the side. A little bit of that raw sienna on there, hand brushed on, just to grunge them up a little bit. And so we're at the rear. We'll go ahead and see if we can get inside the shuttle bay for you. There you can see the Klingon emblem. I backlit like I talked about. I've got the little overhead control room there with some red lighting, kind of keeping with the theme of the red lighting here in the observation window there, and the red bridge lighting. Here's our really bright lights you can see coming back from the front part of the bridge there, that cast all the way along the neck and all that. That looks really good. Those are those lighthouse LEDs again. And so there's the overhead detail. On the shuttle bay, you can see what I did there is I put in the girders now that go in on the ceiling and along the walls, and that brought out the detail on that real nice. I'm still looking for a shuttle to fit in here. I had a couple pop up. I looked at a few on Shapeways, and they're basically too big. The smallest one I found was about the size of a dime, and it would sit right in the middle of the floor and cover up all that work I did on the floor there to light that emblem. So I'm kind of going with the idea of I might do something and look around for something kind of like the worker bees that you see, the little small worker bees that go with the Enterprise refit. Maybe I'll take some of those and modify them a little bit or something, because I have some of those in 1/350 scale. And I won't put them right in the middle. I'll put them kind of off to the sides or whatever, and I'll call them maintenance vehicles or something. You know, maybe they had some maintenance vehicles, like a one-man maintenance vehicle or a two-man, you know, smaller craft or whatever, and they would use that for little short trips, or they would use it to go outside the ship and do maintenance and stuff like that. But you know, we never really saw many Klingon shuttlecraft, so we can kind of use our imagination on some of that stuff. But there's the overhead lighting on that. I went in and fixed all of the light leaks around that photo etch part that I told you about, you know, on the walls when we put that together. And so that's all cleaned up. Got our impulse engines here. And now we're going to fire the rear torpedo. We give that 2 pushes, and our torpedo lights up here in the back. And we got our sound with that now. So that looks good. Just some basic shading and weathering around this little area right in here. Had a couple tiny little light leaks right up in here that I fixed. And so we took care of those. And that's looking good. We'll give you a back view here of the weathering on the wings and everything. And up around the impulse deck. Like I said, I got all the little light leaks fixed around that. Nothing major at all. I don't want to sound like the light leaks are really bad on this model. They're way less than what you normally deal with on a model this size when you're putting this much lighting. And like I said, doing all the shuttle bay detail there, it really brings up the amount of lighting that you're putting in that. So, and the kit wasn't really designed for that, but it all worked out pretty good. We'll turn it around here now, and we'll look underneath. And you can see we have the detail on the bottom now. We showed you all the paintwork we did here on the bottom. I did go back and re-weather this a little bit more to make it more match with the top once I figured out that the white, really thin white, light gray was covering better and showing up a little bit better than that gray ink that I was using in the demo video when I showed you guys doing the weathering on this. So that made that look a little bit better. I went in and darkened up the around the Klingon emblem on the bottom there a little bit more to make that more subtle, and I think that works pretty well. You can barely notice it now. It's not sticking out like, you know, blatant anymore. It looks pretty good and blends in with the rest of the ship. Some here's kind of looking up at that bulkhead here on the front. You can see some of the more of the detail there. that's just a really cool part of the model. I really like that. It looks great. And I'm not sure if my camera will show this from the bottom too well, but we've got some detail up on the bulb here and the neck and all that. So there you go, guys. A little bit look on the inside of this nacelle over here. So that's pretty much it, everybody. I think that's about all I can show you. It turned out really nice. Here's a little bit closer look at that base. And again, on the camera, I don't know if the color shift will show up here, but you can kind of see the blue especially turns from a blue to sort of a purple, and the red there will kind of go from a little bit of a red to more like a, you know, burning red or like an orange red, and the green shifts a little bit from green to kind of greenish gold. But that looks really nice. I'm glad I decided to do that. But again, if I'd ever get a better base for this, I'll be perfectly happy with the base that it has. So I may do something with Jerry on that a little later with a V'ger backdrop or something like that, or, you know, similar to what I did on the small 1537 scale K'tinga back a couple years ago. But that's it, guys. She's all finished up. Again, like I said, if you have any questions about anything and you miss anything along the way, or have any questions about how I painted it or wired it or anything like that, feel free to drop a line on the comments in the video. So we'll call this one done, everybody. I'm really happy with it. Great model. I highly recommend this kit. It's kind of big. If you got the room for it, though, it's an awesome model. And if you're a Star Trek fan, it's almost a must-have, especially if you have a refit. It's a perfect companion piece for that. So great job by Polar Lights. Great job by Tenant Controls. Paragraphics on the photo etch for the shuttle bay. I also highly recommend that to bring the model up a little bit more. It's really nice. So okay, everybody, we're going to move on now to our next build. I'm going to be coming back in probably about a week or so, and I'm going to get back to work on the big Star Destroyer and get that finished up. I had to order some fiber optics to get that finished, and we're going to do a couple other things electronics wise on that, maybe a remote control board to run the lighting in that one to go along with the green strawberry lighting kit that's worked into that model already. So we'll come back and finish up the Star Destroyer, and then when we finish that, or maybe even in between when we're giving you a few updates on the Star Destroyer, we'll be giving you a couple of updates on the big Enterprise that I'm working on, the 72-incher. So that's going to be pretty exciting to see. Got some work done on the shuttle bay and some of the other, you know, I've been doing a lot of tedious work on that model, cutting open the windows and things. We're not to the point where we're doing any major construction yet, but just thinking about some of the things that need to be done along the way. So we'll give you an update on that. And then we'll start a brand new build, something new, probably something sci-fi. We'll have to see what that might be, but we'll keep that a little bit of surprise for you guys. So thanks for tuning in, like always, everybody. Thanks for the comments. Appreciate it. And again, any questions, just drop a line. We'll be happy to help you out. We'll see you next time, everybody. Take care and happy modeling. Special bonus alert, everybody. I almost forgot. All you guys like to see the model in a little bit of low lighting here, so I just went ahead and shot this little segment here at the end just to show you what it looks like. Here's the lighting on the top of the wings that we have flooding onto our little emblems on the top in that kind of little V pattern. You can see how nice those lighthouse LEDs really do a great job of doing that. You can see it gives a beautiful, powerful lighting effect there. I really think that looks good. And kind of a look here from the front, looking straight on at it. You can see the windows much better here on the sides, the lower part, just like it should. You know, looking at these in a regular bright lit room, like I said, they're not going to show up as defined. But if you were to shoot this model in a darkly lit room with professionals lighting it and everything, they would look just about right. So I really don't think the photo etch part's necessary there on the bottom. Let's take a look at the bottom of the wings, and as I said, you can see that I moved those LEDs out just a little further because I thought on the bottom of the wings they should create more of a flood effect all the way across the wing, and they also light up the inside of the nacelles there a little bit too, that you can see. So let's turn it around and we'll give you a look at the back for one last shot here. This is a kind of famous shot of the let me turn this one light off here, And maybe it'll kind of replicate that kind of famous shot of the, besides the shuttle bay being open there, it'll kind of replicate that shot of the ships flying towards V'ger. And one of my favorite things is that lighting up there at the front part that goes all the way back along that neck. I really wanted to make those lights almost blindingly bright like they were on that, that scene in the movie. And back into the shuttle bay, and low light, it really blows that up on the camera here. So there you go, everybody. Like I said, this one's a wrap. Thanks again. We'll see you guys later, and happy modeling once again.